There you go.
There it is. Good afternoon. It's Monday, February 13th, and you're at the Administrative Committee meeting. We have Art Bedke on my right, John Weber on my left. I'm the chair, Catherine Bonzo, and we'll start with the approval of the Administrative Committee January 9th minutes.
They look good to me.
And to me, John?
No,
No one.
they're fine.
Oh, okay. I think that they're fine. Our second item is Friendly and Diverse Communities Resolution presented by Jen Piffner. And the mayor.
I'm actually going to turn it over to the mayor.
I've been looking forward to this.
Thank you very much, Chair Bonzo, Councilors Weber and Bedke, and Assistant City Supervisor Jen Piffner. It is with great pleasure that I get a chance to discuss this resolution that is extremely important to all of us here in Moscow. Because, and I'm going to talk a little bit, this is about welcoming people to our city, our wonderful city. I'm going to talk about some of the whereases and some of the meat to this resolution that we have in front of us. And the city of Moscow is a diverse community composed of people from all over the world and welcomes all people seeking the opportunity for a better life. As well, the city of Moscow is the home of the University of Idaho and enthusiastically embraces students from all over the world. My last count was there's 85 different countries that are represented on the campus of the University of Idaho. I've had the great pleasure of getting a chance to intermix with those students, having dinner with those students, and I'm talking about, and I use the term kids, they are, yes, adults, from all kinds of places, China, Japan, Vietnam, countries in Africa, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, yes, Iran and Iraq as well, and all over France, Norway, Sweden, and the list goes on. I won't bore you with all 85 different countries, but there's a slew of them. Point being that these new residents are a part of our community. They bring fresh perspectives, new ideas, and they contribute to the vibrant community that we have here in Moscow. The city of Moscow has, through past statements and actions, affirmed our commitment to be a friendly community, acknowledging that discrimination impedes the social and economic progress of a city by preventing all from fully contributing to the culture, spiritual, social, and commercial life in our community. The contributions of all individuals in the city of Moscow are essential to our city's social and economic growth and prosperity. The city of Moscow is committed to nurturing its diverse, vibrant, livable community for all residents here. The city of Moscow is committed to being a friendly and diverse city where all residents and visitors feel welcomed, safe, and able to fully participate in and contribute to our city's economic and social life. And we urge all residents of Moscow to do their part in reaching out and welcoming all of those who live and visit in our community. With that being said, the significance and importance of this is for our city to grow and to prosper economically with the various diversity we have and the rich culture that we have here in Moscow. We need to move forward, and any immigrant is welcome in the city of Moscow. So what I would ask is that every counselor sign on for this resolution and that it becomes part of our regular agenda for our next city council meeting so we can discuss it in full. With that, I'm open to any questions.
Do you have any questions?
Just comments.
Okay. Do you have any questions either? No. Go ahead.
Well, as I said at the previous committee meeting, Moscow's always been a city with a smile. That's been its mantra for many, many years, and I think this resolution reinforces that concept, and Moscow is a very livable and vibrant community just because of our diversity, and I think we need to encourage it and foster that sense of place and being a welcoming community to people who come to us here to be a part of our community and benefit us all.
Okay, I do have a question.
Okay.
It's in the first whereas, and I wondered, I know we talked about the students, and you talked about that we have 85 countries, but I wondered if we need to include professors and staff, or because I know we have visiting, I know we have people from other countries that teach. And then I thought maybe in the whereases you were trying to cover that, but I thought specifically because you were saying to the University of Idaho, I wondered.
Well, in the next whereas as well, if you read that, you could double word it because you got new residents, which are a very vital part of our community, that bring fresh and interesting perspectives. And that I believe that covers that, Catherine.
Oh, yeah, my first.
Because it doesn't matter whether you're a professor or whether you come here for some company like MZ, for example, and work, or if you come to a place like Schweitzer Engineering to live and work. And so I think it's broad with folks from all over. And I don't think, in my view, I don't think it's necessary to specifically point out one segment of that as professors. I think that should be as a whole, as new residents. John?
Okay, well, I'm not quite finished yet, so hold on. So what I'm trying to say is because you had delineated in the University of Idaho students, I just felt like then it was just to encompass the rest of the personnel there. It wasn't like you were on purpose being exclusive. It's just that I thought maybe it hadn't been thought about to also include professors and staff or whatever else might be a part of that whereas.
Well, if you have a good way of wording it, I look forward to seeing it.
Okay, and how do I do that?
Just write up how you think it should be and present it, because we're going to be discussing this during the regular council meeting next week.
Okay.
Shoot it up to Gary or Jen and me,
Okay.
as well as fellow counselors.
Okay. So if I want to make an addition is what you're saying? Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay. And
This is just not a one-way thing, folks. So the importance of this whole thing is that we need to be working together to get stuff done. Look, with the diversity of our community, we all know, do we always agree? Absolutely not. But isn't that the kind of the fun thing with our community? Is because we need to work through things. And I think that's what makes us progress forward. So I look forward to your comments on that.
okay. So then I will. Yeah, that'd be great. And then John, did you have something?
I think it's fine the way it's written. I've read it over 3 or 4 times, and we are basically stating that we essentially welcome anyone that shows up, and that we appreciate their input, and we are glad that they're here, and I think essentially that's all we need to say. I personally would be fine if this was put on the consent agenda, but I guess that's, you would prefer to have it on the regular agenda. That's
Well,
okay.
it's a resolution, we just about have to.
Yeah. And I had another question. So when I was reading and looking up stuff, and I looked up our code, and Chapter 19 is the one that deals with all our personnel stuff. And I know a resolution is a statement that we're making as a council. Should we ever go further and address it as a code?
Well, you know what you've got all kinds of discrimination codes already that are covered in the city.
The city
So
only
it-
says gender.
Well, it says all kinds of things. We can get Rod. Is Rod back here?
Yeah.
Yep.
Rod, you want to come up here?
I just wondered if.
I don't know if you need to repeat something that's already in our code, in our policy.
But if you make it into an ordinance and you have penalty phases and things like that as well, and it becomes a legal quagmire to articulate what you're trying to do and what the penalties are, and as a resolution, it's an aspirational statement of the way we want the city to work, as opposed to ordinance, which calls into question matters of law.
And we do, in our code, do have a discrimination ordinance that is pretty, it goes farther than the state.
No, okay. And in a resolution, would you ever put that we have that information? Or, I mean, I know this is our intent as a resolution, but I just wondered, I guess I'm just looking, I was just thinking about that as a community, we have been inclusive, and you're reiterating that with the resolution. I just wondered do we include that information ever in a resolution?
Well, it depends on what the intent of the resolution. I believe that the mayor's resolution, or the resolution that's been crafted, is just to say that the city of Moscow is a welcoming city, and we're not
Reinforce
stating that
that.
we're not reinforcing all the laws that we have that protect the citizens here and visitors.
Okay. Well, thank you for the clarification. Is there anything else that you have to say?
No, I'm
John?
good with it.
All right, so then this will go to regular agenda.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mayor. Item 3, Moscow Farmers Market 2017 Policy Update. Date with Kathleen Burns.
Good afternoon. So this is kind of the dry stuff of the market. But every year we, as staff and commission, work with Rod and legal to go back over our policies and to update them. And so I'm here today. We sent you the document in the packet. And I kind of made a cheat sheet to make it kind of easy to get through this. I do want to recognize that Erin Carroll is here, and she's our chair of our Farmers Market Commission. And then we also have Dr. David Pierce with us, who is also on the Farmers Market Commission. So we've been working on policies. Every year we start all over again, and so it's an ongoing thing. So I referenced page 2 of 9. We listed no wholesale or resale products of any kind. We're going to tweak this wording a little bit before it goes to council because its placement is out of sync. Mr. Steed called me this morning and said, it should read a little differently. So we're going to work on that, and we'll send you an update on how we're going to place that. Because we start with no, but then we go into exceptions, which is blueberries and asparagus. So we're just, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to explain the
Oh,
change
right.
that's been there on page 2 of 9. On section C, it says resale produce vendors. They're going to move the no wholesale or resale products of any kind down to below that where it says exception.
Yeah.
Exception is going to be stricken, and then what it's going to read is no wholesale or resale products of any kind except for the following to read better.
Oh, yeah.
And Walter's not here, but there's a little history with this. We had a problem getting okra into the market, and him and several other customers wanted okra. And so okra used to be in this list, but now Tonemakers brings okra, so it's scratched. So every year we look at our inventory, our product inventory, and what our growers are producing and bringing. And we have a real problem with asparagus, where we are here, and then blueberries. But we're working on both of those. So until we have that fixed in inventory, it sits there. So the next one I want to talk about is page 4 of 9, and this addresses just the issue of cleanliness, pack it in, pack it out. Vendors are in charge of their own trash, what they create. It doesn't get to be put into the dumpster system in the alley on Jackson Street. It doesn't get to be put in city containers. And so we reference Appendix 4, which is where violations happen. So that's just a clarification there. When we go to 6 of 9, that's just a clarification too, going from non-attendance, and if you don't follow through and let the market manager know that you won't be attending. We have a real problem with that because every Saturday we're doing Tetris work, if you can envision that old video game, and repurposing booths because some vendors aren't there yet because they don't have produce yet. So we resell their booth space, and so the non-attendance policy is very important for us for mapping the market every Thursday and planning for Saturday. Then page 7 of 9, it just makes clarification, and this was very important. We talked about this a lot with the Farmers Market Commission. We had never had clarification before in the policy of who's who, and there's been a lot of discussion about that. So this year we added the clarification between a seasoned vendor and a walk-on vendor.
Yeah, I thought that was great. Very helpful. Very
Real clear. So then a new one is page 7 of 9. We start addressing the issue of this is a best practice nationally of starting to source local products in the market for producing either value-added or the prepared food. And you'll see that of 7 and 9 too with the F. With the on-site prepared food vendors, can they source their carrots or their onions right in the market versus Winco or the Cisco truck or Charlie's Produce.
Yeah.
So we're just starting with this. We didn't put a percentage to this. You will have 5%. But this is just a best practice that's happening pretty nationally, and so we thought we'd catch up. And then, again, on the commission, asking the farmer seat on the commission if they have excess product, and yes, they do. So it's not a supply stream problem.
Right.
It's just addressing the issue.
I was glad to see that the farmer's market is 50% vendors
Yes.
for ag products, which
Yeah.
keeps it a farmer's market.
Correct. And we work on that pretty hard.
Yeah.
So, next is page 8 of 9, and that's where we're going to go into, we did a waste audit this last year, and we've done several other waste audits in the history of me being here, but this is another best practice. Compostable tableware, the prices come way down. We're working with Latah Sanitation. We're going to work out the process. We just attended the Bellingham Market and saw their signage and everything. And so this is new this year, is sourcing compostables. And our AmeriCorps Kelly, that works with the water department, has developed a whole list of sourcing. And then we'll be working with Andy on process. But and then page 8 of 9, this is new, is defining a forager. And we'll retweak that wordage as well. We looked at other policies from up and down the coast, from Seattle down to Portland, and we're going to be tweaking some of the verbiage in this on the Section 2 of permits. It'll go to state and federal land within the 200-mile versus referencing Go Rye.
Just for your clarification.
Yeah.
On page 8 of 9, where it talks about forage vendors, on number 2, where it says national parks in the Northwest, and that's going to be stricken, and it's going to be replaced with federal land, so it'll read each state and federal lands within 200 miles of
Yeah.
Moscow.
We don't really have any national parks, almost, maybe just a whiff of Rainier or something, but that's about it, isn't it?
Yes,
Well,
this
Rainier's
language
not
was
in the
lifted
200.
from, I think, Seattle's Farmers
Yeah.
Market is where they got the forager
Yep.
definition.
Yep.
Well, the question I had to do with, I know that you covered national and state parks, but I wondered about just if a person picks it from their private property.
Well, that's not an
You don't-
issue.
So you don't have to,
That-
No.
to delineate that?
No, no, because the way it's read is may ask.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
So if it's on their own private land, it's not an issue.
no.
They can give themselves permission.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Thanks.
Any questions?
Nope.
Any answers?
Fun to read, have to say.
Huh?
I thought it was very fun to read.
Oh,
And I
good.
appreciate the map.
Great. John, you're good? Okay.
But I would like to put this on regular agenda so you can present.
Yep,
Yeah?
be glad to.
You're okay for that? Yes?
I am.
Okay. And then we've got the item 4.
Strategery.
Yeah, strategic planning, research, and recommendation, and Jen's going to present that.
This was the one that took lots of reading.
Yeah.
Yes, it did.
Well, it's been a lot of time.
Well, no, it's cool, though.
Yeah.
And I'll just shift chairs so I can drive the PowerPoint here. Wanted to start today, I know the council is looking forward to recommendations regarding fees. The Farmers Market Commission has done a tremendous amount of work when it comes to planning, analysis, and all the things that could go into a recommendation. So I'm going to start with the planning, and we'll get you to where you want to be here in just a few minutes. Some of this is information you've seen before in the recent past, actually, talking about the value of the farmers market, which is really the driver for the commission to look at some planning and for the city staff to assist in that, knowing the value of the market and how important it is to our community, both from an economic impact side and a social value side. Our economic impact report, which you saw a few months ago, highlights that we have perhaps anywhere from 94 to 128 jobs that are generated from the market. And really, the bottom line, getting down to the 3.94 million up to 5.46 million in economic multipliers that our market generates. We've got some visitor numbers that come from that as well. We've nearly doubled our market attendance from 2003 to 2013. Of course, those are just snapshots on those days. Could be rain, could be sun, could be all sorts of things there, but it gives us a good idea of kind of where we've come over the years. Visitor spending also up to 8.2 million, with a conservative estimate of 4.1 million. So some really neat things that are coming from that venture itself. We also noted in that report that it's an incubator for entrepreneurs. We've got lots of folks that have graduated from the market and gone to brick and mortar. We have 20 to 25 firms that we've estimated there, and since then I think we've thought of a couple more that probably should have been in there.
Yep.
Mr. Bolin and Hog Heaven Sausage is one that comes to mind. So some really neat things that have come
Yeah.
out of there.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. So, and then the beer and wine economic cluster, looking at our region and some of the new wineries and beer brewers that we have, and market having an impact on some of those. So we're seeing a growth there as well. I don't think we're the only ones that see a growth, but we definitely are benefiting from it here in this area. Then on the other side, we've got the Moscow brand. We did that project over last year and talking about what makes Moscow special. Top three things: university, the market, and downtown are some of the big things that we see that define us as us. And again, market's number one, right up there with the university. So that's a big deal. And then we see it in our awards that the market has received. We're number one market in the state of Idaho. We're also the oldest market in the state of Idaho. Of course, you know a lot of this, but I'll just provide some of the history as we go. And we've also been ranked one of the top 15 farmers market in the nation. So, like, kind of a big deal. So, strategic planning, because of all of that, because of the value that we've seen, protecting that, really, as we move forward, was the reason for strategic planning, knowing that we have a great market in place, not a ton of things to fix, which is hard to remember when you're looking at what you need to address in strategic planning, but I think the Commission did a really great job of that. Some of the work that the Commission had done leading up to this was kind of defining their driving forces and trends, and that leads right into their mission and values, which I'll highlight next. But looking at the market as that economic driver, service delivery, how do we make it the unique experience that people come to expect, and the market's role in placemaking, speaking right back to that community branding project. In history and accomplishments, we did I think we think the first ever cumulative history of the market, at least have gotten an initial draft of it, which is the bulk of the report that you received in your packets. Just kind of going through and looking at those big things that have happened over the years that have gotten us to where we're at today. So that was really neat to be able to do through the strategic planning process. And really that legacy, talking about, and this was great work that the Commission had done beforehand, and it was really helped the process when we came in and said, okay, what about your mission and values? Where are you at? Or, are you where you want to be with those? And they were, and I think they're spot on and make good sense. And talking about celebrating life on the Palouse, opportunity to buy and sell locally, that's supported by the policies we just discussed. When it comes to produce, distinctive handmade goods, all those fun things. And then the values, again, this all ties back together. Getting access to the locally grown foods, that economic opportunity is a theme we see again and again, which, given the nature of the market, makes good sense. Community, again, see it again. Community branding, it's a good thing. It's what makes Moscow who we are. And then information, talking about prepared vendors saying, okay, we have these locally sourced foods in this particular product today, and farmers being able to say this is what was grown today or picked today or harvested today. And so a lot of those different things that we have in place, they're all tie in. The Market Commission came down to 5 major challenge areas, and these challenge areas are similar. We use the same type of process that we use for the City of Moscow strategic planning process, so a lot of these terms are similar. These challenge areas came from surveys that we've done for vendors, local businesses, commission members, previous Farmers Market Advisory Board members that were helped to drive the market and organize the market before we had the commission structure come in. So a lot of data went into these over a long period of time. So it was interesting and challenging to boil it all down, but it became very clear that these are the 5 big things that the market's facing. talking first about advisory and operational expectations are unclear and lack boundaries, really talking about how staff can best serve the commission. The commission's role with the council has always been fairly clear, but how do we get the commission the information they need to make the recommendations to council so you can make the decisions you need? A couple of those different types of things. This strategic planning process falls right into that. The city did a similar, one of admin's strategic goals was, or challenge areas was strategic planning, providing the information and providing the structure to share that information. This is very similar to that. And then looking at, we've got a few other things like volunteer procedures. So just some of those operational type things that this challenge area, doing a few of these actions and strategies can help us to address. And I've listed here the goals and then what staff has committed to deliver to achieve those goals, which will help move us forward on the objectives and to tackle those issues. So those planning tools, increasing those through the strategic planning process, and we've got some different timelines here that we'll be working through, like I said, volunteer procedures handbook, annual commission training, those types of things. So we've got a map as we move ahead on how we're going to address these. The second one, market integrity threatened by lack of clear policies. This is something that Kathleen and the Commission have worked through year after year, a complete review of the policies, addressing changes that need to happen, but looking at taking that one step further and providing a little bit more of the why behind the policies. There's some in there that there's still some discussion that perhaps people want to have to really line out the, clarify exactly what we're trying to attempt in those policies and what we're trying to achieve so that a vendor can come in and say, okay, I may not agree with this, but I can see how you got there and I respect that. So trying to build a little bit of that into the process, a little bit more than we have at this point. And so we've done the vendor guidelines and updated policy documents by February, and that's really to kick off this coming market season. We'll have registrations open for vendors here in the next few weeks, and so getting that round so we're ready to go for this season, and then we'll continue to do some further refining of those policies over the next year. Different facets, a glossary, what do all of these things mean, and then also looking at, okay, what do you get when we put these policies in place, some of the assurances that a vendor could have, for instance. This item right here speaks specifically to the fee recommendations that Council's been looking for and that we'll touch on here in just a bit, but looking at the allocation and distribution of market costs. We've got a couple of factors that our initial analysis has dug into a little bit more than we have in the past, and I'll talk about that in a minute, but really looking at total market costs, how vendors play into that, how the social value versus the economic value plays into that, kind of taking that pie and saying, okay, how big should each person's piece be, and how do we justify that? So a lot of analysis is going to go into this moving forward, and again, we'll talk about it here in just a minute. Some of the things we've done initially is the historic report analysis on current resources and revenues, which I'll report on in a minute, and then a fee allocation model proposal attempted in January. Again, talk about that in a minute. And then we've got some other things that we'll look at as we go forward here, but really digging into the numbers behind how that can be presented, and also on this one as well, for fee revenues, for instance, to explain what a person would get for their fee revenue or fees that they pay. What's the value that they get for that, which is another piece that I think we're ready to take on now.
And if you can go back, the very last line here, develop a multi-year plan. This came from the vendors and commission members. Because the way the commission is set up, there are 3 vendors on the commission, there's 3 customers, and then there's 3 different hats, whether it's Aaron with the WSU, Latah County Extension, and then we have one other one. But this came from the vendors. It's like, what is the 5-year plan, and what am I expected, and what will the growth look like? And so not just going year to year, but actually looking at projections. And this is something, too, that Peterson addressed in his report, is how do you get to sustainability and what's the projection. So we put this in there because this is very important.
Well, I figured, and I just had one, I figured if you're going to touch on this, tell me, but it had to do with how many vendors you see staying, and then that's probably what's led to a longer discussion about this, or a more deep discussion about, because whenever I've heard about the Farmers Market Commission, this one is all I've ever heard about. Right. This particular part, like that being dissected and dissected.
No, they do a lot of work.
No, I know
Yeah.
they do. That's what I'm saying. But this is the thing that rises up that you end
Yep.
up hearing about, but you don't know all the other
Yep.
stuff. You know.
Yeah. And there's a lot of interest in this item, and I think that's why it probably comes up most often. But yes, but I will touch on your point just
Okay,
in a moment.
thanks.
So.
Yep.
And then looking at the market faces immediate and severe infrastructure needs. And if you remember with the Luthi approach with the city's strategic plan, all of our issues are framed in a very negative. I mean, we call a spade, and it's sometimes not pretty. And we struggled with that a lot in the commission. And one of the things I told them first off is I'm not used to framing things in the negative light. And so, but we really had to call it out and explain it. This, for instance, ties directly into one of the city's goals when it comes to downtown infrastructure, really taking an honest look at what we have in place, what we need in place, and what we want in place, so those different levels, and being specific about it. And we included this item really to be involved with the city on, okay, if there's a downtown project that comes forward, what does the market need? What piece does that look like? And being prepared to share that information, say, an amazing grant comes up, or we have another opportunity. We just want to be ready for that. And so this will help us get there. Looking at layout, some of the items some of the descriptors we used here was unsafe, restrictive, limits growth. Really looking at, again, non-attendance. We need to know when people aren't here so we can Tetris those folks together. Mm-hmm. Looking at other opportunities with the streets so we can make it safe, we can make it walkable, we can do all those types of things. And then look, if we get a bunch more vendors, where do they go? What's the best case scenario for that? So those are some of the things that we want to research and find kind of a best case scenario and start planning for as well. So again, those are our top 5. The sky is not falling. We promise the market's still amazing and wonderful and is doing a lot of good things. So yeah, I always have to take a breath after that one.
Yeah.
So, and then I'll let Kathleen talk about, we just put in some of the programming and some of the things that happened from last year.
So we still have a contract with Backyard Harvest to facilitate our food stamps at the market. And again, when we submit our numbers to the Idaho Farmers Market Association, we still have the highest numbers in the state. And again, we were the first market in the state to work with that program. This year we added the state of Washington picked us up for the WIC and the Senior Farmers Market Nutrition Program checks. And I just presented on this over at the state conference, and we have really high numbers for our location. So the state of Washington is very comfortable keeping that contract going, so that's really positive. So just some of the background, we coordinate music times 2. There's 2 music sets every Saturday, so that's 26 times 2. We do the high five programming with the kids, kids tasting, kids cooking. The speakers wall. I mean, we do a lot of education. We have people calling us now for this summer, and so we hand out that information a lot as well. We don't reserve spaces on the speakers wall. We just facilitate the speakers wall. We have a lot of community group participation in the market. A lot of different commissions participate in the market and facilitate information for the city, whether it's road projects coming up or construction projects or infrastructure projects, tree commission, a lot of different commissions. Human Rights Task Force does their food drive. We're in partnership with the U of I Chess Club. We have those oversized chess pieces. So it just goes on and on and on. This is a lot of event planning for 26 weeks of special events. Our AmeriCorps, Jessica, has been doing a lot more with cooking demonstrations. We partnered with P and Lennell Commission because it was the year of the Pulse. We started smoothie demos. We did the waste audit. It just keeps going, all the different events that we do. And then there's always homecoming.
Yeah.
When we move. Yeah. So now this is our back to Gary Riedner, thinking like an engineer. We saw this on collecting data with the Washington State Farmers Market Conference, and now we're doing more with day data. And how many people were on the speaker's wall, this is kind of dumpster diving into data, but it also looks at your needs assessment and how many people are there and who's there, who's participating. So we're refining this. These are your sales reports. Everybody's always interested in the sales reports. This is mandatory this year to participate in the 2017 season. It's in the policies. We upgraded the policies in 16. So these are numbers that we've been keeping. These are numbers that are lost. You can see from some of the value added in 15, 14, 13. These were not this was a voluntary thing. Now it's a mandatory thing. And this all gets back to the Peterson report, which is tracking the value and, tracking sales. And these are really good sales numbers. And I presented this at the conference too. And these are really good numbers for the size of our market. Go ahead, John.
So your numbers indicate that in 2016, total sales was 1,300,000.
Reported.
Total reported sales was 1.3 million.
And then if you go back to the original thing, we're talking about $4 to $8 million in sales.
Yeah, and that was the spill effect that Peterson studied. Those were the jobs, the brick and mortar, the area restaurants, the area shops, the co-op on Saturday. That was his looking at the overreaching value of the market to the community. Yep.
What percentage of total sales, how accurate do you think that $1.3 million is?
That's a good question.
So they've changed their policy.
And I think it's, as we look forward, that's something to consider in looking
Yep.
at other markets' experience and saying, okay, where do you think your accuracy level is here, so we can gauge just how in the ballpark we are or aren't.
So we're using a software program for them to go into their account and record their sales. So that's a new process. DJ spent 60 hours last year taking a paper sheet and transforming that into tables. So this is mandatory now. We're not retracting this. This is a go. So.
Comment from the back.
Yep.
Yeah. Sorry, I was looking at the thing.
This is great.
Sorry, with regards to the reporting numbers, hi, Erin Carroll with the Farmers Market Commission. With the reporting numbers, this is new that we've been asking it, and if you ask how accurate you are, we don't know that. They're self-reporting numbers. I will tell you that in the 2015 season, Gina was with me, so she can help me remember. We went booth to booth asking and encouraging people to report their numbers because we were making it mandatory at that time. And we realized that one of the big concerns about reporting their numbers was transparency. Why do you want these numbers and what are you going to do with them? And it was an opportunity for us to educate them on what we use these numbers for, that it helps us get grants, that it helps us do economic impact studies and potentially help with infrastructure decisions and all the wonderful things in our strategic plan. And so we can't tell you how accurate they are, but I can tell you by having a strategic plan and by building a long-term plan for a fee structure, I do honestly believe that they will become more and more accurate because vendors will know why we want those numbers and how they're being used. I think that they would be underreported at this point in time because there was a fear a few years ago, I think that subsided, that by reporting large numbers, they were going to get hit with higher and higher vendor fees because there was no consensus on how vendor fees were set. So I think with the plan, they will become more true. I think they're probably underreported, but there's no way for us to know that. Sorry for interrupting.
No,
No.
that's additional and helpful. Thank you.
That's great. Go?
Sure.
Okay. So these are some of the social programs, and I just want you to look at a little spread here. We've been working with the EBT, which is your food stamps on the card. Then we worked with Catholic Charities in Spokane on a Fresh Bucks program. and that brought in additional money. Then these are our first numbers for 16 of the WIC checks, and these are only WIC recipients in Whitman County. And then Senior Farmers Market Nutrition Program of Whitman County. And we'll see those numbers rise in the next year because we'll have a full 6 months versus partial year. Because the state of Washington, again, is picking us up.
And the state of Idaho does not offer those opportunities for markets, so that's why we haven't done the Idaho side of it.
Yeah.
Okay, and this, when I talked about some of the research and analysis we've started doing, we went a little bit deeper into market costs as the initial impetus to look at potential fee recommendation to the commission and ultimately the council. We looked at estimated costs for the market from 13 forward because those are the 4 years on Main Street. So to stick with the apples to apples, we went that route. Looking at the arts department costs. So if we took the arts department budget and we applied an allocation factor to those things we couldn't directly allocate to market or arts, for the items that we could direct allocate, we did. Came up with an estimate over the years of what we think that may have been. Then looking at the other department costs, these are the ones you've seen in the past. This is where police pitches in a little bit, Parks and Rec pitches in, fire, all those folks and the various activities that they help us with. And came to a total market cost there listed on the third line. Then we also did a comparison of vendor fee revenue over the years, and how much money we've actually taken in from vendors. And I think, Councilmember Bonzo, this is where we talked about more vendors will affect your fee revenue, which we saw an increase in vendors from Jackson Street to Main Street, and then fee increases will also affect that revenue. We actually had in 2012 as well was a 3% increase. We've kind of done a biennial every other year. There's been a fee increase. So then looking at the percentage of vendor fee revenue to the total estimated market costs, wanted to see just how much of that pie that we see vendors pitching in towards on those costs. And from 30 to 41% over the years is really where we've seen those fees have helped us cover costs. Of course, leaving the balance for the city percentage. And then, again, those fee increases. And Councilmember Steed had a good point. He asked me earlier. He said something about vendor. I said in the CCSR for this item that vendor fees were keeping pace with costs, and they're actually raising a bit. So he pointed that out, and I said, well, yep, they are. And so one of our goals was to make sure they were keeping pace. Mm-hmm. And so seeing that they've actually kept pace and stayed ahead as well. I think it's also really important to note the total cost of the market has stayed fairly flat, and I think that's a testament to Kathleen and her team's management of the market. You saw all those programs that we do, and some of those are newer, and we're still maintaining that cost at this level. So I think that's really important. Let's see. First of all, here on Main Street, I'll make sure I got all the caveats there. So. Recommendations. We're finally coming full circle, well, slightly full circle here. What the staff had done in order to help the commission make a fee recommendation to council was the background and the history research on costs analysis to see if there were some instances, for instance, if those vendor fees hadn't been maintaining a similar or a constant portion of that total cost of the market share. We say, there may be an opportunity here to make an adjustment. So the percentage of market cost was an important check for us. Also, an item that's been discussed quite frequently lately is maintenance of the bathrooms, the downtown restrooms, I should say, what that impact from the farmers market folks might be. We've gotten actually Parks and Recreation has budgeted in this current budget year $857 for several cleanings per market day throughout the season for that. That was a good number to hear. If it was considerably higher, we could have said, yeah, could be an opportunity here for an adjustment. Given those two things, and also probably more importantly, our analysis has kind of pointed us in the direction that fee adjustments have helped us to keep pace over the years. Our fee structure, though, may be the basis that we need to look at. We've got about, I think it's 12 to 15 different facets of the fee, from if you're on a corner space or a full booth, or season versus walk-on, produce versus prepared food. There's a lot of different pieces that go into that model, and between the staff analysis and talking with the commission, you saw that inequitable allocation there. Really, we think the adjustment needs to come from the fee structure, not a direct overall fee increase, which is why staff recommended to commission, and they authorized at their last meeting, to not make a fee adjustment at this time. Really driving us back to that major challenge area and some of those to-dos that we need to get through, knowing full well that the review needs to be completed in advance of the fiscal year 18 budget. And the CCSR Councilmember Steed also let me know that they said do it before the fiscal year 18 budget by July 2018. That's 17. July 2017 we'll get that done, so in case you were concerned. Secondly, in your packet, you saw a memo from Gary Reedner. He has assisted with this review and kind of kept pace with us as well, looking also at that operational overview document, which everybody got in their packet, which was pretty lengthy. And that's the document that shows just what it takes to put the market on day in and day out. The annual tasks, the daily planning, preseason and postseason, all of the bits and pieces that come together to make the market what it is. And looking at that, and looking at the potential to study the organizational structure of the market and perhaps bringing in an interim full-time manager from March 1 through the end of the fiscal year. That gives us a couple of benefits. Since it's only part of the year, then of course the cost is greatly reduced. We do have budgeted an 8-month, 30-hour-a-week position, which is slated to begin, I believe, mid-March to take us through the market. With the funds budgeted for that, operating contingency, and then just capacity within the budget, we would be able to cover the additional cost, which is estimated at $4,947.
How much money is currently in the contingency fund?
We have $10,000 in the operating contingency. We haven't used contingency for the past, since 2013, as far back as I went to look. Again, just sticking with that market on Main Street idea.
So that's what I had a question on. So just in coming aboard, so from what I understand, you, besides being art director, you took this on, and then this has grown. And now it's gotten to such a place that the juggle between being arts director and managing the farmers market just doesn't balance out. And, yeah. So, and is that enough in terms, you just, in having a half a year person when you, because that's their recommendation, right?
Right. And I think there's been discussion, I know there's been discussion of a full-time market manager before this process, but the analysis of the costs and looking at all the tasks that go into it, realizing the economic value plus the social value, which is really the next piece we need to kind of quantify and show that this is the bang you're getting for your buck, vendors, and this is why we have vendors' fees, this is why the city wants to, fund a portion of the market on an ongoing basis, to give that information to both the commission and council so they can be comfortable in explaining the background of why we've come to these decisions, or why the council's come to these decisions. But also to see what it looks like, do a bit of a project and say, okay, what's it look like with a full-time market manager? How does that factor in, and how can that inform our decisions or recommendations for staffing moving forward?
Well, so when you talked about the strategic plan, is the strategic plan thinking about having that person or not?
The strategic plan calls out a complete review to see if that kind of person is needed or not, or if there's other efficiencies that we can find. Really need to dig into that operational overview and the different resources available, both from staffing and partnerships. I used to work with Backyard Harvest, for example, on EBT and whatnot, to see just what efficiencies can we find, and where do we maybe need to boost, where do we need to maybe cut back. So pretty much everything's on the table as to how can we best move forward in the most efficient and responsible way.
Well, that's terrific. Do you have any questions or anything? Comments?
Well, I think you folks have done a great job on narrowing down the focus of the whole process. And I also have thought for a long time, and you showed that the amount that the farmers market costs the city is nowhere near the amount that the farmers market is paying for. And one of the reasons I bring that up is, for example, the swimming pool, the HERC, the ball fields, all city-sponsored events and city-sponsored venues, nobody is making a profit from the use of those venues and facilities except the farmers market. And the farmers market has got a number of people that are making bank, as is said, because if they weren't, they wouldn't be there. If they're not making enough money to show up from Royal City or from just down the street, they're not going to do it. And I personally appreciate what has been done to point out that we have got a fairly long way to go to not necessarily equalize, but to increase vendor participation in the cost of the market, not to mention the cost of the new public restroom that we're putting in. And from everything that I've heard from any of the people that have given testimony, they feel that the farmers market is going to be the most benefited organization with the new downtown restrooms, and the amount that the city is going to once again have to put in to maintain those, to clean those, to repair those. And I think the farmers market should be responsible to bear a large part of that cost, unless somebody can show me that they are not the most benefited organization that is downtown and where those restrooms come from. And those restrooms are quite expensive, as we all know. And I would hate to see the amount of money that we're spending on them be degraded because we don't have enough money in our budget for parks and recreation and then the other departments of the city to maintain them properly. And I have been very much in favor of increasing the fees at the farmers market for a number of years and have not gotten any support on it. And I may not get any support this time, but at least I think it should be looked at that we've got one part that is city-sponsored that makes a lot of people a lot of money. I think we should get some of that money if we're going to provide the venue where that money is made. And that's essentially my comment.
I would comment back that this is a case where we're presented with the same set of facts, but people can look at it from different perspectives and draw different conclusions from exactly the same set of information. And I look at it from the point of view that although Moscow is distinctly subsidizing the market, the Peterson study indicated there's a lot of other benefits that devolve back from it. And I think that perhaps looking at it strictly as a farmer's market, where the farmers should be supporting the market, is half the whole story, because the other half is the consumers that come into town and benefit from the market and supplement their dining room table to the extent that they want to spend money, and also go forth and visit other businesses around town. So the city puts us up as sets a venue that then benefits more broadly the rest of the community. And I'm not thinking that the bathrooms necessarily benefit the farmers market in terms of the farmers and the market, but the community is large, not only for the 26 Saturdays a year that it's in operation, but for the rest of the year and other events as well. So I'm not entirely arguing your point altogether. It's just perhaps discussing a little bit more fully what percentage of farmers market should the city be subsidizing or not might be called into potential review. And certainly, as was discussed, rebalancing the nature of the fee structure could certainly help along the way, too. So I think there's some other intermediate steps before a more broad-based fee increase is levied, and perhaps sort of from the last line of every good research paper that's ever gone into a peer-reviewed journal says more research is required. Mm-hmm. And so I think looking at those facets, what percent should Moscow subsidize the market, and the fee structure, how it relates to the food vendors versus the produce vendors, and things like that need to be better reviewed before we jump in without adequate support from the data to say this is the way we should be going.
Did I suggest that?
Obliquely.
I thought that I had basically said we've got a situation where we have got a group of people that are here for a profit. They're making a profit, and I don't think that they're paying their fair share of the expenses that help create that profit. And I have no problem at all with the fact that some increase in business in the surrounding area may happen, but I have seen no numbers that would indicate how much that is. Pick a business. Does the Breakfast Club, do they make a lot more money on Saturday mornings than they normally do?
I think they're packed to the gills all the time, so it's kind of hard.
So probably not, or go to the other end of town to the One World Cafe. I mean, are they making more money? We don't know that. And no one has given me any indication that the amount that has been generated by, and I'm going to, those folks in Royal City, and the reason I'm using them is from what I understand, they do not even come for the first 3 or 4 weeks of the market, and yet they pay all of the attendant fees so that they can keep their spot. And if they weren't making enough money and still giving up the expenses, I don't think they'd be here.
Well, as you pointed out with your first statement before, is that the vendors come here because they can make a profit, and if the fees rise to the point where they can no longer make what they perceive as an appropriate profit, they stop coming, and then you pretty soon don't have a farmer's market anymore.
Well, you can see why I had only heard what I'd heard about the.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to, if it's okay, I'm just going to move us on. I was just going to say that the strategic plan that you laid out, I think in those 5 points that really, you said negative language, but it's like where the rubber hits the road language, is really addressing everything that you're talking about, and we're going to be able to dive into that. So you want to go further?
Just one quick
Yes.
thing. With those recommendations that city staff is committed to before, like I said, the budget process for FY18, getting that fee structure looked at and making a recommendation so it's more equitable, so that you can say, when you do want to do a fee increase, or if there's a certain goal, we can do that and plan for it, both for the market side and the vendor side, in a way that is something we can explain value to the vendors, and to give the council, of course, when they're asked why, they can explain it and have the information that they need to do that as well. So those twofold. By July 17, have that fee structure redone. Right. Looking at also that multi-year plan is the commitment of staff to both the commission and the council, should they be comfortable with the recommendations that are laid out here.
Yeah, well, and I felt like the action that you're asking is that. And I think Kathleen's job as art director has so shifted with the farmers market. I was really glad to see that there's consideration for another person to actually, anything that brings in $4 to $6 million into our community needs more attention than you're able to divide yourself into. So I was really glad to see that as part of the recommendation. So I think we'll just put this action onto this recommendation onto the regular agenda. Are you okay with that? I take that as a yes. So there are no other. Thank you very much for presenting.
Thank you.
With no further items on our agenda, I think we can move to adjourn.
It works,
And so moved. So over it.
and it is done.
Yep, we are finished.